A logical fallacy is an error of reasoning that will weaken your argument and, in most cases, undermine it completely. Today, we're going to look at the 10 most common logical fallacies. Circular reasoning. Circular reasoning or circular argument is when the argument is restated rather than proven. In other words, instead of explaining why something is or isn't true, you just fall back on the original argument as proof. Here's an example. Opium is sleep-inducing because it has a sleep-inducing quality. You haven't really explained why opium is sleep-inducing, you've just confirmed that it is in fact sleep-inducing. A typical formula for circular reasoning is A is true because B is true, and B is true because A is true. Another example of this would be, the wind is invisible because I can't see it, and I can't see it because it's invisible. When constructing an argument, make sure to avoid this kind of logic by being as specific as possible about your proofs. Hasty generalization. A hasty generalization is when someone makes a sweeping statement without considering all of the facts. For example, if a man walks through a town for the first time and sees 10 people, all of them children, he might conclude that all the town's residents are children. This argument fails to explore all of the data surrounding the topic and attempts to suggest a conclusion based on this limited knowledge. This is also known as overgeneralization and is best avoided by exploring and presenting every aspect of an argument's topic. Slippery slope. A slippery slope is a conclusion based on the premise that one small step will lead to a chain of events resulting in some significant event, which is usually negative. In other words, if we allow A to happen, then an unwanted Z will eventually happen, which means that A should not happen. Here's an example. If you don't study on Saturdays, your grades will suffer. If your grades suffer, you won't graduate school with high honors, which means you won't get a good job. Since you won't have a good job, you'll have to live on the streets. This implies that not studying on Saturdays will result in eventually being homeless. The problem here is that the main issue is being covered by extreme hypotheticals with no real proof to support the argument. Straw man. A straw man argument is a technique where someone distorts an opponent's claim so that it's easier to refute, or where someone tries to refute a point someone made by giving a rebuttal to a point they did not make. For example, if someone said schools should be more lenient with standardized testing, a straw man reply to this would be, if we stop giving tests in schools, we are going to raise an ignorant generation that won't have the skills to live in the real world. This fallacy serves to undermine an honest and rational debate with unfounded claims. Ad hominem. An ad hominem is an attack on a person's character or personal attributes in order to discredit their argument. For example, a mother might reject the judgments of a male pediatrician because he has never been a mother and couldn't possibly understand the child's situation. She has done nothing to directly oppose the doctor's argument, but has instead tried to undermine his judgment without actually having to engage with it. False dichotomy. A false dichotomy or false dilemma occurs when an argument presents 2 points while disregarding or ignoring others in order to narrow the argument in one person's favor. This is also known as either-or fallacy. Here are a couple of examples. You were either for us or against us. I thought you were a good person, but you didn't donate to the charity last year. There are only 2 options given when there are really more options available. This attempts to drive the argument in a direction where only one specific answer can be given in order to incriminate the opposing party. Appeal to emotion. An appeal to emotion is when a writer or speaker uses emotion-based language to try to persuade the reader or listener of a certain belief or position. An appeal to emotion generally follows the logical form, X is true. Think of how sad you'll be if it's not true, or think of how happy you'll be if it's true. Example, I deserve a second chance to submit my assignment. This past week was so busy for me. I had football practice late every night, I had tons of homework in all my other classes, and my girlfriend and I just broke up. In general, what someone perceives to be unfair, how someone is feeling, or even things that someone might perceive to be moral or immoral do not carry much weight for making an objective argument. Equivocation. A fallacy of equivocation is when an argument is presented in an ambiguous, double-sided way, making the argument misleading. This is also known as a doublespeak fallacy. Here's an example. Hot dogs are better than nothing. Nothing is better than hamburgers. Therefore, hot dogs are better than hamburgers. The word nothing in this case is used to refer to both not anything and all things. It's important to precisely define your words and be consistent with their usage. Bandwagon appeal. A bandwagon appeal is an appeal that presents the thoughts of a group of people in order to persuade someone to think the same way. It argues that one must accept or reject an argument based on peer pressure. Here are two examples. Many people buy extended warranties. Therefore, it is wise to buy them. My family holds this as truth. Therefore, everyone who disagrees is simply wrong. These are not strong arguments because they have no basis in fact. False analogy. A false analogy, also known as a weak analogy, is when two things that are unalike are being compared based on a trivial similarity in order to prove a point. For example, people are like dogs. They respond best to discipline. This is an absurd analogy that attempts to correlate people and dogs based on one minor similarity. I hope that this video was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and be sure to subscribe to our channel for further videos.
Sometimes there is no consensus on what the truth is. And when you're talking about important issues like policy decisions that affect all kinds of people, that makes for some good journalistic analysis. Topics like, should race be considered in college admissions? Should 16-year-olds vote? Should there be a carbon tax? But not every topic warrants a both sides approach. Some viewpoints are simply not backed by empirical evidence or are based on false information. And journalists have to be really careful not to present them as legit debates. If they do, they are creating a false equivalence. So, how can you spot false equivalence in journalism? First of all, what is false equivalence? It's when you set up two opposing sides of an argument and make it look like they hold equal weight when really, they don't. I got an example for you. Take genetically modified foods or GMOs. The science is pretty clear. GMO foods aren't harmful to your health. This has been validated in peer-reviewed journals, yet you often find articles and news segments about GMO foods where non-experts and interest groups question the safety of GMOs. And presenting both of these views as valid is actually illogical. A false equivalence. These two sides don't deserve equal time in a news story. Not even close. One is based on scientific consensus and the other is based on vague speculation by interest groups and non-experts. The logic of comparing them is flawed. So now that you get what false equivalence is, why does it happen? Well, it can be tricky for journalists to avoid, especially when news is breaking and reporters are scrambling to fact check a story and be the first in line to publish it. Enter misinformation and propaganda. Propagandists try to persuade people to buy into a particular cause or belief. They often take advantage of the chaos of breaking news and spread rumors and conspiracy theories on social media. They get really sneaky to make a phony post seem real. They create a bunch of fake accounts and then use those accounts to like and comment on the post. Even trained journalists can fall for false posts when they are shared widely by real-looking accounts on places like Twitter or Facebook. And it's easiest to get fooled during breaking news events. Online convos start on social media, where there's no focus on fact-checking. These platforms distribute more information than any other institution in history, but they aren't doing a good job at checking for what's real and what's not. And propagandists don't just manipulate journalists on social media, they also know how to game news programs. In an effort to be balanced, news shows often bring on people with different views to debate each other, leading to those screaming matches that go viral.
If you think that's trivial, I can't believe you're actually a physician. Look, this is the most studied element in
I'm not sure where you get your facts
that
from.
Is actually
your facts are correct. Go to the
Dr.
CDC
Dorian, finish, and then
website.
Dr. Wolfson, I'll give you a chance to reply.
Now, when one, not at all credible side comes on to spew false information or distort the facts, it's treated the same as the factual side is. Just being on the program legitimizes it. Then those clickbaity sound bites spread on social media and we all end up engulfed in a toxic misinformation wildfire. So with all this manipulation going on, how can journalists stop the spread of misinformation to the public? We thought it would be a good idea to talk to a real journalist about how they deal with false equivalence. Meet Marisa Lagos. She covers politics for KQED, so she has to think about this stuff all the time. So could you give us some tips on how to avoid false equivalence?
Absolutely. My number one tip is to think like a journalist, and that means to be skeptical.
Do your own fact checking. Don't just accept something somebody's saying just because they're on TV or they're in a certain newspaper. Tip number 2 would be to check your sources. So when somebody says something, when you're reading it, or when you see them on TV, think about where they're coming from. What's their point of view? What's their agenda? Understanding the reason somebody might be making a certain argument is really important so that you can make your own call about how valid that is. Make sure that when you're talking to people or you're, say, looking at different types of news outlets, that it's not all coming from kind of the same place. And that also means to sort of check your own biases and question maybe, why do you feel a certain way about something? Is that because of your own life experience? So kind of back to the first point, be skeptical of everyone, including yourself.
There you have it. If you think more like a journalist, you can avoid the traps of false equivalence. Recognize it when you see it and think twice before hitting that share button. What are a couple examples of false equivalence that you've seen recently? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like this video, check out this episode we did on how to spot bad science reporting. You'll be glad you did. It'll make sense when you watch it. And last but not least, give us some love and like and subscribe. And stay above the noise, y'all. Peace out.